You look way taller than me.
I'm on this branch here.
Shrimp. Hi, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Garen, and this video is about setting up your bike.
Now, each of these subjects is worth a deep dive, but today we're just going to give you a nice overview to help you get started on the right foot.
All right, before we start, make sure you have your riding gear on. Street shoes are different than riding shoes. You might have a backpack with some tools, added weight. Make sure you're ready to ride before you set up your bike.
So one of the most important things to start with is saddle height and saddle position. You're going to do it.
I thought you were going to do it after position.
Should I do it?
I don't care. No, it's too high. You did it perfectly. I just didn't. I was waiting for the word position, and I was going to let it loose. Sorry.
And saddle position.
So for saddle height, it's always better to start a little bit too low than too high. If your saddle's too high, your hips are rocking when you pedal, and you'll know it pretty quick. But if your saddle's too low, your knees will be too bent at full extension, and you won't get the efficiency you're looking for.
So there's a few ways to get your saddle height just right. I'm going to show you the heel method. So start by raising your saddle all the way up. Make sure you have your riding shoes on. Place your heel on the pedal at the lowest position, and you should have almost a straight leg with just a slight bend in your knee.
You know what I do? I use this trick taught to me by the legendary Ariel Lindsley. I put my armpit right here in the saddle. I straighten my pointer finger. My pointer finger is right there in the center of my bottom bracket. From that point, I adjust the saddle up and down until it feels right, and that's it.
Sounds like a man.
So now we'll talk about saddle setback and tilt, for which there's really no formula.
Yeah, most saddles have some increments etched on the rails. Start there in the middle, and if it feels like it's too far back, like you're on a recumbent, like your feet are in front of you, slide the saddle forward. And if it feels like it's too far forward, like you're too close to the cockpit on top of the stem, slide it back.
So for saddle tilt, it's pretty simple. We'll start with your saddle pretty level and go from there. If it feels all right, run it. Otherwise, tilt it just slightly down. If you feel like you're sliding off towards the stem, adjust it up. If you're feeling pressure up front, it's uncomfortable, tilt it back down, just small increments as before.
Okay, so just like with saddles, handlebars often have increments etched into them. They're under the grips here. It makes it really easy to cut them. And there are distinct benefits to having wide bars versus narrow bars.
Narrow bars often better for us smaller folks and also lead to more agile steering, squeezing through trees, and just helps me be in my best push-up position for when things get a little rough. I've seen pictures of myself with 800 bars and it's just way too wide and I don't have that strength to handle compressions.
Very nice. Okay, wider the shoulders, wider the handlebar. They give a larger rider more leverage over the bike. Bummer about wider bars is you're not going to be able to fit in those tight spots you might with narrower, but you have a lot of leverage over the bike, and for cornering and wide open spaces, it can be pretty nice. That said, bars are like golf clubs. They are sized to fit each person.
I'm 5'4" and I prefer 760 millimeter bars.
Yep, and I'm 5'11". I like my bars at 777 millimeters, but it's all preference. The only thing to remember is that you can't add width, so you can only take it away. So go in small increments so you don't cut too much and find them too narrow.
And if you're a little nervous to do this at home on your brand new carbon bars, take it on into your bike shop and they can do it for you. Now we'll move on to bar roll, which refers to how forward or back you have your bars rolled within your stem. Just like most of these things, it comes down to personal preference.
So the way bars are made, if you roll them forward, you're gonna get more upsweep, less backsweep. Less backsweep for me makes you ride with your elbows out, which for me is the goal. Another thing you get by rolling your bars forward is a bit more cockpit space. So you're moving the contact point away from your saddle. So if your bike's feeling a little cramped, you can alleviate that a bit by rolling your bars forward.
So moving your bars a little back will lead to less upsweep, more back sweep. This can be a little more comfortable for people with sensitive wrists and moves your weight a little further back to weight the rear end. So my personal preference, I start by having my bars rolled to about the same angle as my fork, and then I roll them just a tad forward from there.
I do the exact same thing. I set my handlebar up to the same angle as my head tube. I roll a bit forward from there. I roll my bars forward because that is how you ride in an elbows out position. I find that if your bars are too rolled back, you're riding in this elbows back position, and I just don't like that.
A lot of bars come with these little etchings right here that you can just use as a reference point as you're adjusting your bars.
Okay, on to stack height, and stack height is effectively bar height. And this is adjusted by moving your stem up and down the steer tube. So if these orange spacers were below my stem, my stack height would be higher. Because they're on top of my stem, it's lower. To adjust this, all we do is pull your top cap, loosen these pinch bolts on the stem, pull your stem off, and put your spacers under or above your stem, wherever you like it, and reassemble.
All right, so a good place to start is having your bars about the same height as your seat. A tiny bit above or below is just fine. From there, just go ride, see how it feels. If you feel like your front end is washing a bit, like you want to have more weight over the front end, that might be an indicator that you want to lower your stack height. If the opposite's happening, if you want to have more weight on the back end, if you want to feel a little more stable going down the super steep stuff, you can adjust and put some spacers below your stem, which will raise up.
Raise up!
Raise up! You want to give that a try? Put some spacers below your stem, which raises up those bars, puts you in a bit more upright body position, and puts more weight over the back end.
You may notice I've got my stem slammed on this bike. That's not because I like super low stack. In fact, I kind of like high stack. The reason I've got my stem slammed is that as you raise your stem on the steer tube, you're actually bringing the bars closer to you. So a good way to keep that cockpit dimension and keep that long, spacious reach that you want is to slam your stem all the way down and get higher rise bars and get your stack height out of the handlebar, not the steer tube.
All right, so currently I have not the best look going on here, but that's because I'm still kind of figuring out my stack height and what I prefer. I might even be changing my bars soon, who knows? But until I know exactly, I'm gonna leave my steer tube a little long because as we know with bars, once you cut it, it doesn't grow back. So I'm gonna leave it long for now until I find it just right, and then I can actually make it flush. It won't be flush, but yeah.
I like that.
Okay, now moving on to controls, which a big part of that is your brake levers. How do we find the best tilt for you? So starting off, just find your most comfortable riding position where your arms are bent and comfy, your pointer fingers resting on your brake lever, and adjust from there.
Okay, so there's benefits to running your levers at a bit steeper angle or a bit flatter one. The bit steeper angle makes it so you can straighten your wrist and keep your finger in line with your wrists in that riding position, but the drawbacks are that you're probably putting a little more impact into this socket in your hand.
Riding with your brakes a little higher or flatter can have its benefits as well. When you're going down something pretty steep, it helps keep your angles a little more flat or neutral, and lets you ride with a little bit of a lighter grip. Your weight's more on your palms. However, if it's too extreme, you're gonna have this big kink in your wrist and it's gonna put a little more pressure there. If you're off the back and your levers are really far down, you're trying to reach your lever like this, it doesn't make much sense.
My only argument for that would be in the steeps. Now in high speed shit.
You don't want to be way off the back.
Exactly, in the steeps, the last thing I want to be is off the back. I want to be aggressive and on the front.
Yeah.
So if my brake levers are angled further down, then I'm able to be in the attack position in the steeps. Because if you're on the back, off the back, you have no front traction. You can't brake. Yeah, but that's just me. So everyone's got an opinion on how they run their brake levers, and I'm pretty particular about mine. I don't like them flat. I like them a bit steeper. In fact, I get in the attack position, I set my arms straight, I point my fingers, and I put my brake levers there. I start with the extended finger, and if it rests on the end of the lever, that's where I should be. From there, I typically go a little steeper even. If your levers are flat, then you're taking your impacts like this. I want to save the bending of my wrists for impacts. So I've got a straight wrist when I ride, and I take all those impacts right through the hand and right up through the biceps or whatever. My little T-Rex biceps. But oh yeah, so another thing I'm really particular about is running my levers inboard. I've got my levers set up so where my one finger is at the very end of the lever when my hands are at the outsides of my bars. So I'm getting all the width of my bars. I'm getting my one finger at the point in the lever where it has the most leverage so I can stop my bike whenever I want with as least effort as possible.
All right, so my preference, I really go based on feel. I get into my comfy position, I find that, and that's where I tighten the levers. If anything, I'd say I prefer them more up than down. I like to make sure I'm using my full width of my bars. So sometimes for me, because I do have smaller hands, that means actually moving my controllers out a bit from where they come stock. These bars have little notches here. I find that actually those are a little too far in for me. So I push them out, so I'm using the full width of my bar. My fingers are resting right on the notch of the brake lever, and my controls are also in. I can easily reach them, but I don't want them rubbing my thumb knuckle there. I've had that happen.
All right, this one's more contentious and is subject to more variables than anything we've talked about today. Everyone's got an opinion on tire pressure. Tire pressure is weird though, because there's variables like how much you weigh, where you're riding, what kind of tires you have, whether you have inserts, how you ride, how fast you ride, the trails that you're riding on, whether they have rocks or whether they don't, whether you're in wet or dry conditions. All these things affect tire pressure. And if you're a mountain biker, you're probably gonna be tinkering with tire pressure for your whole life.
So the less pressure you run, the greater traction you're gonna have because you have more tire on the ground. That can feel really good. However, you are running the risk of dinging your rim, of getting flats easier, and of actually rolling the tire off the rim in corners.
Yeah, pan to Jackson.
On the other side of things, we have high tire pressure. This can be really beneficial, especially for bigger people, for going fast, for bigger compressions, technical terrain. You run less risk of getting a flat tire. However, consequently, you will have less traction, so you're gonna be pinging around on rocks and roots a little bit more. It might not feel quite as comfortable.
If I find that it's too squirmy, if I find the bike's trying to squeeze out from under me, or I'm burping the tires in high compression, I'm gonna come up with the pressure a little bit. If I find the bike's really rattly and jarry and the tires are holding solid in all the corners, I might have a little bit of room to come down a little bit. It's all about rider preference.
So a good range to start with is from 20 to 30 PSI for your tires. As you can see, that's not a huge range, so do yourself a favor, go purchase a nice digital gauge. As floor pump gauges, they're just not that accurate. Every little bit matters, and that's a general statement. A lot of smaller people could run even 18, 19 PSI. You know, you're racing downhill, you weigh more, you're going fast, you might be 30 to 33, 35 PSI.
Another tip I have for you is to Google SRAM tire pressure calculator. Put your parameters in there and it'll spit out a number. And again, it's a great starting point, but no one's gonna be able to tell you exactly what tire pressure to run because it's just an endless mystery. So I'm probably 190 with all the riding gear on. This is a 50-10 trail bike with single ply tires. So these are EXO tires. I run 26 or 27 in the back, 24, 25 in the front, pretty consistently. Should I talk about weight? Should I talk about weight though? Isn't that like a...
You have to talk about weight for bikes.
That's true.
When I'm at events and like women don't, I'm like, listen, like this is about getting this, you have to talk about your weight. Like no one's judging you. So I'm trying to move past that because that's bullshit. So I weigh about 130 pounds with all my gear on, and I like to ride anywhere from 21 to 24 PSI in the rear wheel, depending on where I'm going, and around the same up front. It just depends so much on what I'm riding that day, where I am, what I expect to be doing. 21 would be the low end, 24 being on the high end for me.
All right, last thing, a little goes a long way. Bring the tire gauge with you and play around with this. Like we said, you want to run just enough, but not too much. And that's going to be different for everyone because of different riding styles, different terrains, different bikes, and different rider weights.
And finally, we're on to flip chips. So this is an adjustment that's in the lower link of our VPP suspension bikes. This changes the geometry of the bike. We've made a whole video on this subject, so you can head over to our website to get into more details there.
But since we're here, here's the cliff notes on flip chips. Our bikes have a high and a low setting, with the exception of the V10, which has a high, medium, and low setting. And what the flip chip does is change the geometry of your bike. In the low setting, your head tube angle will be a bit slacker, your bottom bracket a bit lower, and your suspension's kinematic a bit more progressive. All of these things lead to a more aggressive riding bike. So if you're riding steep trails, more aggressive, chunkier terrain all the time, you're probably gonna leave your bike in low.
All right, and then in the high setting, it actually raises the bottom bracket, it steepens the head tube angle, and it leads to better pedal clearance, which lends itself to better suspension kinematics for all-day pedaling.
Making this adjustment requires a 6mm Allen key. You're just loosening the lower eyelet on the shock, pulling that bolt out, literally flipping the chips, putting them back in, and retightening to the correct torque spec.
And while you're doing so, be sure to keep a good grip on both flip chips. You don't want them popping out, going somewhere not being able to find them. Again, we do have a whole video on this, so check it out to get more details.
Hannah, what setting is your bike in?
It's in low. That's how I run all my bikes. What about you?
Low. Where we live, it's steep terrain, and I particularly like the more progressive suspensions, better small bump. So I run my bikes in low, but if I was to live in Sedona or the Rockies or somewhere where the riding's a bit more flatter, I would run it in high. Yeah.
All right, so that's the basics for setting up your bike. The next thing you'll want to do is your suspension and sag, but we've made a whole other video for that, so check it out.
Yep, you know, one of the best things about mountain biking is tinkering and finding your setup. If you need help finding that setup, contact rider support, santacruzbicycles.com. Otherwise, trial and error, go out there and have fun tinkering. And thanks for watching.
Bye. She loves you so much.
She has problems.
Dad! She has problems.
Something's up with her.
Does she love Taylor's much?
That's a crazy noise. I think so, yeah.